Yo, hey, we're doing this again. Okay, so I'm re-uploading a new version of this video because people hated the idea that I liked this movie so much that I 100% did not agree with the majority, that some guy with no life spent 2 weeks straight posting false flag requests against my original video and eventually got it shadow banned and finally it was taken down. Well, congratulations, but I still don't agree with you. This is not the worst movie ever, and it's not even a bad movie, and I won't be silenced just because I don't agree with you. So with that out of the way, I'm uploading a new edit of this with a few minor changes, and there will be some new content sprinkled throughout this video. First of all, since War of the Rohirrim, I got into a big Lord of the Rings binge, and I rewatched every single Lord of the Rings movies, even a few I hadn't seen all the way, like the Ralph Bakshi one and the animated Return of the King, which will now be amended in this review. Having now seen all 10 theatrical Lord of the Rings films, and still not Rings of Power because I just don't want to see it, I can safely say War of the Rohirrim is the 4th best Lord of the Rings film that currently exists. Wow, it's 4th best. It's not the best. It's not the worst either. It's number 4. There are definitely way worse films out there, so please don't dedicate a month of your life to fighting my review because I sorta enjoyed the 4th best Lord of the Rings film. Like, are you for real, bro? You wasted your Christmas holiday on this? Go drink some eggnog, bro. Anyway, I will admit this film has some major issues. The story could have been a lot better. The main character could have been better. The main character is controversial. The main character doesn't address her own controversies, but that's not the point of my review. My review is that even if this is not the best Lord of the Rings film ever made, I think this film will go down in history because it has a lot of good achievements and merits as an animated film, and it is a groundbreaking animated film for 2024. I think this film will go down in history, for better or worse, as a freak experiment in animation and an attempt at taking a swing at Miyazaki. I discovered after I put out this review that this film was actually done in an animation style I've never seen before. Something I speculated about in my review, but I can now confirm that this film was actually done with an insane mix of CG animation that was animated on computers and then painted into hand by 2D animators, and having now realized that that is exactly what they did, that's nuts, because that means that this movie was essentially animated twice by 2 different teams of animators. One doing the 3D animation, one doing the 2D animation, and the 2D animation overwrote the 3D animation. I am astounded that they did so much work for this, and I've never seen that done before, and I don't think I'll see that done ever again, because I don't think people will just choose to do that much work ever again. The extra work they did does seem to have made the details on the characters pop a little bit more, but it still leaves something to be desired because then the motion of the characters somehow got the worst of both worlds, exhibiting both the errors common in 3D animation and 2D animation together, because it's literally 2D animation on top of 3D animation. And even if you hate anime, I can't help you, man. I'm an animator and I'm literally animated right now. Lastly, I want to say that there also seems to be a large number of people who just seem to be extremely upset and still hurt over the cash-grabby Hobbit movies of the 2010s and the recent very bad reception of the Amazon show. There are a lot of people that are so angry about these 2 projects that they just want Lord of the Rings to maybe stop forever, and I don't know, maybe that's okay. I don't really know what to say to that because I don't think I'm even going to watch the Amazon show, but if you're mad at Amazon, for God's sakes, take it out on Amazon. Don't take it out on me. There's so many ways you could fight back against Amazon, and I have nothing to do with Amazon. I'm not Amazon, so if you're mad at Amazon, Jeff Bezos is up there in space right now. Go fly up there and talk to him, because I don't have anything to do with that. Okay, hey everybody, it's me, Buster Green, and this weekend there were only 2 movies playing, Kraven the Hunter and Lord of the Rings War of the Rohirrim. And before I get into it, somehow this Lord of the Rings movie became one of the most controversial movies of the year. So controversial that I think I have to specially host this episode from the Controversy Corner. So people were telling me, oh God, MB, you can't see that movie. It's too woke. And I was like, why? Does it improve the work conditions of Americans? Does it have black characters? No, it doesn't. And it was mostly made in Japan and New Zealand. So I guess it really doesn't affect America. But then everyone I could find online just uniformly said on Friday morning that they hated this movie that literally just came out like 4 hours ago. How did everyone see it so fast? And then I was like, well, what's your problem with it? And then people were like, the main character is a woman. And I was like, oh yeah, she is a woman. Okay, that's subjectively true. And then the most obvious connections I could draw were that the last Lord of the Rings project was bad, so everyone's still butthurt over that. And apparently the last movie starring a woman ever was apparently Star Wars The Force Awakens, which was also bad. And here we are today. Now, there was another controversy I saw online that when I looked into what the fuck is everyone's problem with this movie, I guess somehow there's like zero overlap between Lord of the Rings fans and anime fans, with the exception of me. Like, as far as I can figure it out, a majority of the older Lord of the Rings diehards have rejected this movie because it's an anime, and a majority of the cool young kids who love anime don't really want to get invested in an elf movie from 30 years ago. But I saw this movie because I think it's an anime trying to be a cover song of Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind, two of the greatest films ever made, which were hand-drawn animes telling the story of warrior princess women. And that alone had me curious because those are some big shoes to take a swing at. You know, Miyazaki is still like the GOAT. So I had to personally see what the hell the big deal about this movie was and attempt to sit through it, even if it was a failure that everyone hated. And even if it seems that by all accounts, I'm the only person in America who loves anime and has a casual appreciation for the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, I almost gave into peer pressure and I almost got swindled into seeing Kraven the Hunter instead, because I actually think Kraven the Hunter looks interesting. But apparently, my friends who went to Kraven instead of Lord of the Rings came back pretty butthurt and angry about that one. So maybe I'll find out what the problem is there later. Anyway, I stood my ground and I went into War of the Rohirrim because I had 1,000,001 questions about how good was this anime? Was it really going to live up to Studio Ghibli level visuals? And I will say that it kind of does and it kind of doesn't in certain ways. And overall, even though War of the Rohirrim is not a perfect movie, I think there's a lot of cool shit in it that I personally appreciated. So yeah, I'm concluding that this movie is cool and I overall enjoyed it. I'll rank it a B movie. I'll rank it a 7 out of 10. It's not the worst shit ever made. It's not garbage. And I think there is some redeeming value in it. So let's go over this movie. Oh, and before I get into it, I might as well lay down some quick opinions about where I stand with the other Lord of the Rings franchise movies. Once upon a time, Peter Jackson made 3 Lord of the Rings movies, and the first one was way too long and was just a bunch of hobbits taking a walk through a wheat field. But then he made the second one, and the second one was perfect. It made Gollum a pop culture legend forever. Everyone loved the second one, and then later he made the third one. Third one was cool, but dragged on way too long with a bunch of false start, false stop endings. Now, after that, Peter Jackson still needed money, so he made 3 shitty Hobbit movies that were blatant cash grabs, pumping out a very low-stakes story like The Hobbit into a massive 9-hour mess to steal money from audiences. And I kinda hated those movies. And then sometime after that, Amazon made the Lord of the Rings TV show, which apparently no one watched because it was bad for some reason or something. I don't know. I didn't really follow it. I don't know what the controversy is. I didn't even watch it all because I didn't own Amazon Prime when it came out. Although I have Amazon Prime now, I don't think I should waste my time on it because everyone uniformly agrees that it sucks. So that brings us to War of the Rohirrim, which technically is being made as a copyright anchor because WB's ownership of the Lord of the Rings franchise factors on the fact that they are contractually required to make at least one movie in the universe every 10 years or their rights will expire, and they really don't want to lose that. Now, I like this movie. It is animated, but then that opens another can of worms where I have to talk about the animated Lord of the Rings movies. Did you know there were 3 animated Lord of the Rings movies? Well, now with this one, there's a 4th one. So the first one is the Rankin and Bass Hobbit movie. This is the first Lord of the Rings film I ever saw as a kid, and I honestly have a soft spot for it because it was my introduction to the franchise. I think it's a massive work of art with unique 70s crazy fantasy visuals, and I think it really holds up. So then there's the crazy Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings film from 1978. So filling in some gaps here, Ralph Bakshi was a cutting-edge indie animator in the 1970s, most famously remembered for making the Dirty Fritz the Cat movie. Right before Lord of the Rings, he made a film called Wizards, which is also relatively well remembered for having a story about wizards and also loosely being about Nazis. Now, this film was sort of copped out using heavy use of rotoscope, which then I guess he decided that if he could use rotoscope for that movie, he'd use it for this movie, and so he made an attempt at telling the story of the Lord of the Rings. which I guess was amazing because it was the first time it had ever been done in 1978. But nowadays, it's kind of a hard to sit through film. Bakshi's film is interesting because it tells a mishmash of the stories of Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers, and I would say it actually tells the Fellowship of the Ring story better than the Peter Jackson version. Although his Two Towers story is completely junked up and he just kind of runs out of steam and the film sort of ends without completing the Two Towers. I'll also point out that the film weirdly has the most negative depiction of Samwise Gamgee I've ever seen ever. I'm not sure what Bakshi thought he was doing with Sam, but Sam is almost depicted as the villain of the story, just being around to be ugly and talk Frodo out of his job. Now after that, the studio made one more animated film, which was a weird adaptation of Return of the King. But Ralph Bakshi didn't come back, so instead they brought on Rankin and Bass, the animation team who did the first Hobbit movie. They came back and they did this one. Now this one's really weird because it's sort of a direct sequel to the Ralph Bakshi movie, but it's also at the same time a literal direct sequel to that first Hobbit film, and it's giving you some major whiplash if you watch just the Hobbit film or just the Ralph Bakshi film either way. I would argue that while the first Hobbit film was a very faithful adaptation of the book, this Return of the King movie is more like a musical, with a lot of the action being glossed over in the story for otherwise catchy songs about what the idea of the story was and what actually happened in the book. Now, the first Hobbit movie also had some catchy songs too, but it was a lot more on point about getting through the major story beats. And I'll say that the Bilbo versus Gollum story in the original Hobbit is, for what it's worth, my definitive version of that fight. But back to Return of the King, yeah, it's a weird movie, but in a direct version of what Ralph Bakshi did, Samwise Gamgee in this film is definitely the most heroic depiction I've ever seen of Sam, especially as Frodo in this film is otherwise kind of depicted as sickly and scarred and corrupted by the ring. But overall, I feel like this movie is a freak oddity, and I would have preferred if they had just had Rankin and Bass do their full own Lord of the Rings adaptation, but back in the 80s, this is all kids had. And anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about War of the Rohirrim for the rest of this video. So War of the Rohirrim. Does this movie suck? Nah, it doesn't. My biggest complaint I have about this movie is it's just a little too long, and the second hour really drags or so, but that is the exact same issue I have with Fellowship in the Ring and Return of the King, so if anything, they're just playing the hits. Now, the next big controversy, is this movie a cash grab? I don't feel like it is because they hired Kenji Kamiyama. Kenji Kamiyama is an ex-Studio Ghibli background artist. He previously directed Eden of the East, which was one of my favorite animes ever. And Kenji Kamiyama, for what it's worth, feels like he's trying his absolute hardest in this movie. If I had to guess where his mindset was, I feel like this is a misguided yet very bold attempt for him to step up to the plate and see if he can surpass Miyazaki. Create a Miyazaki-level warrior princess movie, which I would say is in the style of Nausicaa and the Valley of the Wind and Princess Mononoke. And that is incredible. That is a brave and earnest effort. Now, I will acknowledge that this does share the Hobbit trilogy's problem of blowing up a super minor story into a full movie. The controversy this time around is that this 3-hour movie is essentially based on 3 little paragraphs Tolkien wrote about how Helm's Deep was established under its founder, Helm Hammerhand. Helm Hammerhand is a big part of this movie. He also has 3 sons whose name also start with H, and an unnamed daughter. The unnamed daughter in this movie is turned into Hera Hammerhand, just to also give her an H name, and she is the previously unnamed daughter and the main character of this film. And she does drive and finish the initial conflict and end conflict of this movie. Now, another argument about this movie is people just don't like Hera Hammerhand. I saw a lot of people complaining online that Hera Hammerhand is a Rey Skywalker girl boss Daisy Sue. I really can't say that about her. All I can say is she's a warrior princess, and that's always been a trope in fiction. She doesn't talk a ton. She has a large number of people trying to rape, kill, or kidnap her, sometimes all of the above. She kills an old man in the middle of the film, which felt very believable. She also kills her ex-fiancé, who the film establishes as being her long-term training partner, so it's believable that she would have known his fighting techniques well enough to beat him in combat. I want to say that she is not a girl boss because she literally renounces the crown at the end of the film, and she specifically goes out of her way at multiple points in the movie not to boss people around. So if you're hating this movie just because the main character is female, I don't know what to tell you, man. Maybe you just hate women. Maybe you can't enjoy movies at all at this point. I feel like there are way more movies in the world that
have women and no men than there are movies with men and no women. And yeah, if you want to avoid women, I don't know, just go to a football game. That's all I can tell you. The secondary argument against War of the Rohirrim is that technically the whole War of the Rohirrim that the film is about, that killed so many people in this film, was completely set into motion by Hera's selfishness of refusing an arranged marriage with her childhood friend, Wolf, the movie McBad guy. Now, this is more of a much more difficult, oblique argument because on the one hand, her whole character is arranged marriage is bad, being a princess is bad, I don't want any of that, I want to renounce it all and do my own thing. Freedom first, wealth second, etc. But yeah, if she had just gone along with the arranged marriage, then sure, the war would have been avoided, her family wouldn't have been slaughtered, and then the whole movie wouldn't have taken place at all. So, like, for the movie to work, she had to reject that marriage. So I didn't want to get into a more nuanced argument, and for the love of God, don't start acting like you're suddenly all for, like, forced arranged marriages, like you're like the Sheik of Afghanistan when this country is so out of whack like it is. Like, just, you know, arranged marriage is bad. I think I have to like lay that out because I see many people arguing for arranged marriage against this movie. Okay, I want to think at this point I've finally escaped controversy corner. So let me get down to what is actually good about this movie. So what is good is that the story tells a canon to the Lord of the Rings, pretty fucked up story of Helm Hammerhand, a Viking warrior king who, true to his name, eventually murders 100 men with his bare hands, and the movie shows that, and it's fucking glorious. So fuck all the haters. The first hour of this movie is fucking amazing. There's some massive Princess Mononoke vibes. There's some amazing cool monsters. There's incredible character designs. And it really feels like they are doing a cover version of Princess Mononoke mixed with the classic Lord of the Rings movies in a really perfect and satisfying way. Now, where the movie starts to slog is when the good guys peel back to the defensive line in Helm's Deep. The bad guys then passively spend about 4 months constructing a siege tower, which turns out to just be a giant wooden suspension bridge. Now, I will say the movie does pay this off by making the siege tower eventually a big centerpiece of the film's climax and making it really fucking crazy and pointing out how exciting and cool that is for the bad guys. But yeah, there's a lot of time where people are just doing construction. In between this time, there is a minor incident where some of the orcs working for Sauron show up and try to find the One Ring. That's a minor subplot, but it was cool enough to see that gone back to. And so yeah, once again, this movie is cool. It's a good movie. I'd say it's a solid B movie. And there's nothing really too negative I can really point out aside from people being butthurt about shit that wasn't actually a problem in the movie, and I don't think they even watched the movie to be butthurt about half this stuff anyway. So now I want to go into the animation breakdown because if you don't know me, I'm an animator, and there's some weird things in the animation here that I really want to acknowledge here. So one thing I can criticize here is this movie was made by Kenji Kamiyama, who has a background of working at Studio Ghibli. I think he did some of the backgrounds in Kiki's Delivery Service. Then he moved on to Production IG, where he directed Eden of the East. And by all accounts, I feel like for him alone, he's trying to do this movie as a love letter to Nausicaa and the Valley of Wind and a little bit of Princess Mononoke. Some of the monster action definitely echoes Princess Mononoke. I think if anything, the fact the main character has red hair is a reference to Nausicaa. And that is a tribute coming from a place of love, and I feel like there are parts of this film that really work amazingly well. There's all these cool, amazing hand-drawn monster animation. There's such good fight animation in this movie, beautiful close-up shots, and this all comes out of a place of deep love where Kenji Kamiyama wants to catch up to the bare minimum that Miyazaki could do in the 1980s. I'm also going to praise that this movie has some of the absolute best horse animation I've ever seen in my entire life. And if anyone ever complains about horse animation in the future, I'm going to call back to this movie as an example of someone doing it right. Because I hear people telling me all the time that you can't animate Berserk, you can't animate JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 7 Steel Ball Run because there's just too many fucking horses. And this movie has hours of fucking beautiful hand-drawn horses. So that's it. It's fucking settled the argument. This is the best animated horse movie ever made. Now, what doesn't work here in terms of the animation is the film's inconsistent and minor use of CGI. Miyazaki has always held out that he fucking hates CG animation. He sees it as a useless shortcut that always looks bad and that it fucking ruins everything. And if anything, this movie kind of breaks his rules and proves them right by breaking them. Like in this movie, you can kind of see that Miyazaki is both based and right that you should never use CG at all when you're using hand-drawn animation this much. Because even though this movie is trying its hardest to do a crazy Miyazaki tribute cover, there are places where the animation will use CG for minor elements like the backgrounds, the flags, the fires, and all these little things all look like ass because the frame rate just doesn't match the hand-drawn animation. And I have to point out that I am hyper aware of frame rate issues right now because I just spent a year fixing those in my own anime. Hey, remember the time I made an anime? Watch my anime. It's good too. Anyway, this movie reminds me that Studio Ghibli movies are perfect because they won't cheap out and have a CG generated flag for no apparent reason at a random point in the middle of the film because it stands out and it looks like ass. And yeah, this film has lots of little places where they cheaped out and had little CG barrels and minor background animations, and it seems like it shouldn't be a major thing, but there are parts where like tarp will flap behind the main characters and you can tell it's CG because it just doesn't match anything else in terms of like the shading. Now, the last thing I want to point out in the animation breakdown is that there are some points in the movie where, especially on the mid shots and the wide shots, the character animation looks very strange, and I'm honestly mystified about what they did here. I can only draw 3 possible conclusions based on the way this movie looks and why it is the way it is. My first conclusion is that this film has perhaps the greatest cel-shaded character animated models of all time. It has amazing 3D models pretending to be 2D animation on a level that I've never seen before, which is potentially possible considering constant evolutions in animation technology as well as advancements in shading. And I have seen a few people on YouTube who can do this level of 3D animation in like Blender and have like highlighted it in the past. However, on top of that, I can still see the limitations of 2D animation on top of this supposed maybe 3D animation. It's got all those little 2D animation quirks, so I'm mystified by what is actually going on here. Now, I can attribute a lot of these quirks to the limitations of 2D animation, but then it's got the precise movements of 3D animation that is just too precise to be anything except 3D. So the next conclusion I'm drawing is maybe this movie was rotoscoped, which would be hilarious because we all know the 1980s Ralph Bakshi Lord of the Rings movie failed because it was completely rotoscoped. And if that's the case, now we have a brand new rotoscoped state-of-the-art Lord of the Rings movie to compare to the bad Ralph Bakshi rotoscoped Lord of the Rings movie. And that's kind of wild. So yeah, if that's what they did, that's such a deep cut reference to the Ralph Bakshi movie, and that's insane. So yeah, I'm still trying to figure this out. If it was rotoscoped, that would explain why there are movements in the anime that are so precisely perfect because they were traced from footage of real people. So that's the only other explanation, is that it's got to be CG animated or it's got to be rotoscoped off of actual humans. But wait, there is one third and final possibility, but this one's so insanely insane that this would be something that's never been done before if it is what happened. The last possibility of what I think could have happened is that maybe this movie was CG animated first, and then maybe 2D animators rotoscoped over the CG animation. Now that would be insane and that would be so much extra work, but that is the only other conclusion I can draw to describe the very precise computer perfected motion I'm seeing, but with the drawing errors of 2D animation on top. So if anyone knows any more information about the behind the scenes creation of this film, I really want to know what they did here because it's mystifying to me and it's new and it's exciting. This for me is the biggest mystery about this film that I can't solve because it has uncanny movement that I just can't place because I've never seen anything like it before. So anyway, yeah, I think Roar of the Rohirrim is a cool movie. I think there's so much cool shit in it that I cannot, in good faith, not recommend this film. Now, I understand that a ton of people are choosing to hate this movie by default without giving it a chance, but that's fucked up and that's stupid to me. This is a good movie. Many people think that the Lord of the Rings movies have run their course, and maybe people just don't want any more sequels to the franchise anymore. I guess I can understand that because those Hobbit movies really sucked and the Amazon thing was a disaster, but you guys should watch War of the Rohirrim. It's a good movie, and that's all I have to say about it. Now, if this movie does really do well at the box office, could it have a sequel? Honestly, I think it could. I think this movie will earn its way to a sequel. They kind of have a sequel hook at the end of the movie that supposedly Hera is going to go on a second quest to seek out Gandalf. And you know what? That's exactly what I want to see from another movie in this franchise. I want to see Miscellaneous stories about young Gandalf. That sounds awesome to me. Otherwise, I feel like maybe that hook is just resetting up a rewatch of the original Lord of the Rings trilogy for people who never saw it, and that's okay too. All right, I guess that's everything I can say about this movie, which I need to say again, this is a cool and good movie, and I feel like it's being unjustly canceled just because people hate Lord of the Rings, or people hate anime, or people hate women. So stop the hate. Just go see a good movie for a change. Like, otherwise, maybe people just hate sequels made to be copyright anchors. But Kenji Kamiyama is doing his damnedest here to make this a good movie. I know people are going to rage at me for this take in the comments, so you know what? Go rage. I'll respond if you're not being rude and you're not attacking me personally. But if you didn't watch this movie at all, don't be a liar and don't mess with me, because I just got fired a week before Christmas and now I'm depressed. All right, later, good night.